Hello, welcome to Slice of Anecdote. We're here to share some stories, experiences, and perspectives of the everyday human. I am your host. My name is Harry. Today, we are going to have a fantastic chat with my mentor. We have Rebecca. She is a physiotherapist, and I think I'm just going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, Harry. Thanks ever so much, and thanks for inviting me on. Yep, as you say, my name's Rebecca. I'm a physiotherapist. Have been since qualifying in 1999, so a few years now. But I've also been really interested in supporting the development of other physios, whether it be through their training or whether it be in their career. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I've got two young boys, and life's pretty busy.
That's amazing. I don't know how you balance out your busy life with your physio and like being a mom, but hey,
It's
you're doing it.
it has been a challenge. It gets easier when they get a little bit older. But yeah, it is what it is. And I think probably I sleep a lot and just try and get as much rest as I can when I can. But certainly the boys, they're quite energetic, so they need getting out there in the fresh air.
That's really
Um,
good to hear because a lot of
yeah,
people would sacrifice sleep to get more things done, and you're telling me you're sleeping a lot more, so people are
well,
probably
no,
really jealous.
I sleep when I can. I mean, it's a case of I like to sort of find me time. It's really important to get that balance, especially in these busy lifestyles that we do engage in. But yeah, if you're juggling a lot of balls, then it's a case of just making sure that spend time for yourself as well. So I do my best to do that.
Mm. Well, I think you're doing a great job.
Thank
And
you.
I want to kind of go into like how we met. I found you on the big World Wide Web when I was
Abs-
having a little bit of trouble with my physiotherapy journey, and you happen to be someone that I connected really well with. I actually messaged a few physios, and some of the other people were just not as responsive and stuff like that. And I guess like this is the reason why I went to you to mentor all sorts of things, from
Yeah.
interviews to coursework and all that stuff, right? So I think I want to really ask this whole entire mentorship aspect of it in terms of how you got into this outside of physio, outside being a mom. Like what is this doing for you?
Yeah, I mean it is an interesting question. I think sometimes, sometimes there's no sort of real intent to sort of walk down a certain path, but um, I get sort of great satisfaction of out of helping others. I mean, ultimately, that's one of the reasons I entered into the physiotherapy profession. But I think as time goes on, we become physios, we become relatively good at our jobs, and then we try and impart that knowledge and that understanding and onto maybe more junior members of staff. And I kind of always been quite interested in teaching, always from sort of school and so forth. And I ended up getting a job with the Open University. It was alongside my physio job. It was just it kind of ticked my academic need. Then I'd done a master's, and I wanted to continue to build that kind of academic side. Physiotherapy is a very practical, person orientated role, but it sometimes felt not necessarily that it was sort of meeting my learning development need. So yeah, Open University role was really great. It really gave me an opportunity to experience what tutoring was all about and mentoring. And it's kind of grown from there really. And speaking with students that were coming out on physio placements and realizing that there is additional support is needed. Not everyone finds academia straightforward or easy, and therefore I just sort of put myself out there as sort of say, well, if people do want help, I'm happy to support them on that journey.
That's so nice to hear. I think it's there's so much like intertwined connections that you've mentioned because in my experience doing personal training, I've discovered a lot of aspects of being able to help people. That's like one of the aspects I really enjoyed about doing personal training. And I think that kind of stemmed a little bit more from my family background because moving to Canada as an immigrant, I am wearing all these hats, right? I have to translate for my parents. I'm suddenly an accountant, suddenly a medical translator for my grandparents here and there. It's like in a way it's like
Yeah,
helping them indirectly and it kind of like fell into personal training and now
yeah,
into physiotherapy. It's always been like something along the umbrella line of helping. And then now reflecting back that I've always actually had a lot of mentors in my life in terms
yeah,
of my elementary journey to learn better English, how to get rid of my accent a lot better, how to read better, and then into my high school, into my uni journeys, I've had a lot of tutors.
yeah,
My parents was never really there for me in terms of just like academically, like they were never really at home, so they always wanted me to outsource a lot of the support. So I never really was shy away from reaching out to people. And I think this
yeah,
is one of the reasons why we crossed paths, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
what is something that you really enjoy about this whole entire difference aspect of mentorship? Say, like your students that you're mentoring someone like me, or the difference between like you doing your physiotherapy career. Is there like any difference?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, ultimately, it's all about, supporting someone or facilitating them to achieve their goal. And certainly with students, it's about just crossing that finish line of the degree, whether it's a undergraduate or postgrad. Um, I'm acutely aware, and certainly from my own experience, that the majority of the learning that we do occurs once you've qualified, and so you've got to get the degree to get that opportunity to do that additional learning. I mean, I was sort of, often sort of reflect, you sort of think, what did I actually learn at uni that I've used in my professional career? And whilst it's the foundations and everything that underpins what I've learned, what I actually learned, I've learned in my career. And obviously it's spanned far longer than the degree. But it feels like for students or for people who maybe struggle with the academic side of it, you're almost sort of restricting the access to develop those skills.
Mm,
Hence, the mentoring. It's interesting you mentioned about accessing mentoring because I think sometimes there is a still, about asking for help, and certainly us Brits are not always that good at it. But mentors come in all different shapes and sizes, and
yeah,
I would sort of say that everyone that we come across has the opportunity to be some form of mentor, some form of a source of information, or someone that we can reflect upon and sort of like, well, I like what they do or I don't like. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a formal kind of agreement or arrangement. Our friends, our family, they're all mentors. You mentioned your family sort of in a way, there's a mentoring thing that they encouraged you to sort of seek help, okay?
yeah,
And actually, that's a real strength because there is so much to gain from involving other people in our lives.
yeah.
I mean, and a good example, a personal example of this is regarding my kids and them going to school. And I know a lot of parents get quite upset about their kids going to school when they leave, as in sort of like age 4 or 5, going to school reception. And it's an emotional time. But, I very much recognize that I couldn't offer everything that I needed to help my boys grow and develop in the way they had the potential to, recognizing that we need to seek that support from a vast majority of people is really key, I think. So yeah, kudos for you for seeking that help and getting it, because an awful lot of people out there sort of struggle. And yeah, it's like, what's wrong with getting people to help you? I don't think there's any harm in sometimes there will be a cost, obviously, but it pays dividends in the end. I'm a strong believer in that. But equally, friends, colleagues, family, they're all patients, even patients. They're all can inspire or mentor in us in different ways.
Yeah, I think so. Because like there's a lot of the add benefits that you don't necessarily see until you do a lot of reflections, and even though you're like going to the mentor for like a specific skill development or some sort of help for a certain project or whatever, like those soft skills are you're trying to develop in how to communicate that muscle, right? It's very
Yeah,
different from the academic aspect, and how the people to people side aspect is quite different. So
yeah,
I think being able to develop that in a different way with different amounts of people, culture, industries, I think it's like a very important skill to be able to
yeah,
have in the back of your pocket. I think it's really good to see someone like you as a parent to recognize that your child needs to go out there and experience the world, that you recognize that not you can't teach them everything,
nope,
and you might be able to guide them to certain things. And yeah, I'm so excited for your child's future, and if that is like the foundation that you're going towards, and I hope that the development is
yeah.
skyrocketing from there. I want to have a little bit more background on which physio specialty you specialize.
Um, well, I would say that my background is predominantly sort of like neuro rehab.
Oh,
But however, I've done an awful lot of different areas. The reason I say sort of neuro rehab is because that, it's probably I've spent the longest time doing that. However, I've in that neuro rehab job, because they were sort of young disabled adults, a lot of them had multiple sort of issues, sort of disabilities, whatever. So it might be respiratory, orthopedic, neuro, along with the sort of pediatric element of a lot of their conditions as well. Yes, that's where I've done most of my sort of years as a physio. I've managed to maintain an awful lot of my skills from a lot of those disciplines as well. More recently, I've kind of moved on more into sort of case management, which
mm,
has again been quite interesting. I think I just needed a change. I just needed, I like to be challenged. I do like to be challenged. And I think a lot of the mentoring that I do sometimes does challenge me. I don't often know what questions people are going to ask, or what support they're going to be doing, or, what kind of feedback they're going to need. So it does keep me on my toes. So having a challenge is not alien to me. I quite sort of welcome it with open arms. So yeah, moving into case management, I literally started off in the same way that anyone else would start a new job or fresh from uni or whatever, and sort of go, look, this isn't an area that I'm particularly familiar with, but I'm keen to learn. And it has been, quite a steep learning curve, but very, very much enjoyable nevertheless. So yeah, a little bit of a mix of everything, to be fair. And I think that is one of the reasons why offering support to sort of certainly physio students, or allied health professionals, whoever may want my sort of support, I've still got quite a bit of knowledge and background across the board.
yeah. Why do you think that you mentioned a lot of in terms like mentorship and continuous learning? I think it's really important as healthcare professionals, and I think in any profession we continue learning. And I think I have developed that type of mindset when I did personal training, and I thought, oh yeah, I've worked out and blah blah blah, and I've seen some of the clients work out. I was like, no, you can't do it this way. But like the more I'm into the industry, the more I feel like I don't know anything. And that's the type of mindset I'm going into in physio, and I think that's
Yeah,
relatively the same thing. And and I think it's interesting because like the more you're in that industry, the more you're kind of gaining more knowledge compared to the average person.
yeah,
But I'm never comparing myself to someone who is the average person. I'm always comparing like myself to the next best person that I can move towards, right? And then
yeah.
the people that I would like to mentor are the people who would like to learn from me or learn from you, et cetera, et cetera. So why do you think in terms of in people in healthcare or anything related in this industry kind of shift their mindset or their career into mentorship a little bit more, or even combine it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone sort of the mentors that I know are within the jobs. Okay, so that they
Mm,
mentor as part of their professional role within the jobs, and I think that's a hugely important role, because that is how we learn. You can't we only know we only know, or we can only know what we've experienced, and so sometimes that kind of keeps things quite sort of selective. So if you have a mentoring session with someone who's had other experiences, different experiences, broader experiences, it kind of offers those opportunities to ask the questions or explore what it is you don't know. Okay. And when you explore areas that you don't know, that sort of sows a seed of inquiry, interest. And for anyone that is wanting to develop, and I would suggest that most physios, most healthcare professionals do in the same way that you've sort of mentioned, it's very much about using that mentoring to be more self-aware of what we don't know, because it's what we don't know that we're going to go and seek. Okay.
Mm,
And you've mentioned there about not knowing or not feeling like you knew enough, but again, that's a self-awareness. You do, you know enough to sort of get by, but you don't know everything. I certainly don't know everything, and I think it's that awareness and that acceptance that we may never know everything,
yeah.
but we're out seeking it, we're out looking for it. Like I say, mentoring, preceptorship, support and development, they are integral parts of any professional team. There is an expectation that more senior members of that team will impart and support the more junior ones. And, I've just sort of taken a step outside of that more formal kind of structure, and offered it to sort of students where, in actual fact, there isn't that same kind of structure. When you become a band five physio, or band six, whatever, there will be a mentoring sort of scheme in place for you. But as a student, it's limited. It's limited. Maybe that needs to be reviewed by sort of universities or whatever. But yeah, so I think skills of mentoring are taught to us as we grow professionally anyway in our job roles. Just sort of, yeah, sort of stepped outside of that. And I think other people potentially do as well. But I would say that there's an awful lot of people that do very good mentoring roles within their career and probably never get really acknowledged for it because it's part of what their job description
Mm.
dictates they do.
Yeah, I think I've had a lot of educators kind of forced into this whole entire role because it's part of their
Yeah,
job description.
yeah.
And do you have any advice or any type of, peace of mind for these people who don't think like this is their thing? Like, how can they make their students, since it's part of their job, like a better
Mhm.
experience for both of them? Like, how would you advise them?
Really, really tricky. I mean, I think you have to take into consideration the bigger picture here as well. Clinical practice is a busy place, no
Yeah.
matter where you are, whether you're on a ward or in a clinic. And sometimes students that come on board for placements, it does add an additional pressure, which maybe comes at the wrong time, maybe comes at the right time, who knows. But life is stressful, it's dynamic, and I think what I would say is that supporting anyone in their development is a privilege. It's a privilege and it's a responsibility that it kind of impacts how that person will continue to grow. All right, there are clinical educators that I still remember from being a student, and there are clinical educators that I came away from and thought I want to be like them, and there are others who I thought no, that's not who I want to be.
Yeah.
These people form our future. And so, in that respect, I do believe that it's a privilege. We've got to respect it, and we have to nurture that because the students that are coming through are the future of the profession. They only want what we wanted when we were students. They want to be
Hmm.
able to qualify with the best possible skills in order to be able to deliver physiotherapy and help people in the same way that as I say, we have. So yeah, I mean, it's always a bit of a nod by your line managers. If you're asked to sort of support a student, it suggests that they trust you and they have faith and respect in your skills. And yeah, it's yeah, grow with the role. It's all a learning experience for the student and the educator. And as positive as it can be, I think that's clearly what everyone really wants.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I I'm also curious, have you learned anything from your mentees slash students that you've previously taught or mentored? Any
Yeah,
stories?
yeah. I mean, I don't know there's any sort of particular stories as such, but every student, everybody has something that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. And that, I suppose I probably learnt that anyway as you know, throughout my career. But students who are seeking help or are struggling or whatever, you know, it's not because they're no good. It's not because they need help with everything. It's just because finding things challenging at the time. And um, I think the resilience, I think these days, certainly, you know, the expectation of the levels of work, especially with the master's degrees. I wasn't a big fan of the master's degrees when they sort of first came out, I'll be honest, but I sort of recognise that, you know, it's an opportunity for certainly people who have got previous degrees, but they work hard and without an awful lot of support. And you know, there's an element of deserved respect there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
with regards to sort of stories, yeah, I think how hard people work just generally. Okay, and I suppose seeing the impact of whether that work isn't recognised,
Yeah.
and how much, I say damage. I think it is damage, to be fair. You know, the lack of confidence that can be, you know, for a student that has maybe failed a placement or whatever. You know, I don't the educators don't see the fallout effect of that, and it's not just professional. It's personal, and so helping students to rebuild their confidence, I think, has been, you know, quite insightful and very rewarding when you sort of hear back from them and they say that they've passed or they got a great mark in their assignment or whatever when they were told they wouldn't. Um, you know, that's a win for me.
Oh, that's really nice to hear it from you because I think you know me in terms of my physio journey. My placements were not easy
Yeah,
for me, and I think
no,
it's just a really huge adjustment in being in wards and being in a acute setting, and it's not something that I kind of imagine myself being a physio when I
yeah,
come from Canada, right? And
yeah,
I've had a few stumbles, and um, I guess for me, it's a good thing that I have grit and continue to not give up and just keep going and ensure that next time comes around, my learning is continued. And I think what you've
yeah,
highlighted before is like when a student doesn't do well in a placement, it kind of becomes personal. And I think that's so true in certain ways, and it depends on the personality of the student, right? And I'm just wondering like how can mentors and educators help these students recognize that it is not personal so that it doesn't deteriorate them from like their initial goal, because I know that sometimes like students really do can't pass or can't really,
yeah.
pass that threshold. Like what
Yeah.
is it that you can give advice to either the mentors or the students that might be listening?
That's a challenging question.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Do you know what? We're only human, aren't we?
Yeah.
And when you look at what our sort of, you know, basic needs are, we just want to be heard, we want to be listened to. And I think if somebody is in that situation where they are struggling and there's a challenge, I think that communication needs to work both ways. Okay, so
Mm,
you know, there's got to be an if communication breaks down, that's when the potentially the issues, you know, not really understanding why that somebody's being failed on certain points, or but equally it works the other way. You know, you need to listen to the educator and the educator needs to listen to you. Okay, and I think that time and discussing it, I'm going to suggest as sort of professionals, okay, because we need to knit these professional skills into all of our communication experiences, and educator sort of student is one of those. I think sadly when students aren't achieving
hmm.
on placement, it seems there's a little bit of a breakdown of that communication, and you know, the student, and I'm generalizing here, so you know,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the case in every scenario, but I think that the student feels like that they're you know, they're being hard done by, or that it's not fair, and those kind of negative attitudes, they do translate into how you react and interact with your clinical educator, and somehow we need to kind of accept that it is, to help build better clinical skills. Sometimes constructive criticism is coming your way. It's certainly come my way quite a lot. But you either take it on board and you grow from it, or you take it on board and you let it destroy a little bit of you. I think clinical educators are just doing what they feel is best. Okay.
Hmm.
But again, I think the communication, having the opportunity for the student to discuss that, to challenge it, and to not be felt like it is unfair, I think is quite important. It's difficult, as I said. Clinical placements are busy opportunities. Often you won't
Yeah.
always be working with the same clinician. There might be multiple. You might not get on with one of your supervisors or educators, and we don't get on with everyone. We
No.
can't. That's human nature. But we do have to be professional. And in the same way that whilst we might not get on with all of our patients, we have to be professional with them and treat them all as equals. We do need to apply the same to that kind of clinical educator student role. There are a ridiculously number of fantastic physios out there that are just trying to do their job, and if they're having a bad day, or if it's whatever, there's lots of things that can influence that relationship. And I think it's complex, and one bad experience doesn't mean to say that you're not a very good physio. It just means that for whatever reason on that occasion, things didn't go the way that we would want. I often use I often sort of try and relate it back to the patient experience. Okay, so when a student
Mm.
fails something, and it may be that they failed an assignment or they failed a placement, it's soul destroying. You work
Yeah.
hard to achieve something, and it sort of slips through your fingers. But that experience is incredibly, it can be incredibly sort of insightful. We work with patients all the time, and these
Yeah.
patients are in a situation where they have likely failed on some level. Okay, they can't walk, they've had a stroke, they can't move, they've got pain, and there's that kind of something isn't right. That's why they're working with us. And to be able to relate to that sense of disappointment, sense of failure, I think it really it can help build a certain empathy, or awareness of how to interact with that particular person. Because when we fail, we kind of know what we would need, to help us in that situation. And therefore, we can emulate that and apply it to our professional practice as well. In my opinion, you don't just sort of say to someone, oh, just crack on, it's fine, just put it behind you. You can't. If somebody's in pain, or they've had a poor experience or bad experience, it needs to be processed. And patients are exactly the same, in that understanding how things may change, or that we need to try a different approach. So they're all everything is a learning experience, no matter how
Yeah.
good or how bad. And I think if you can
Yeah.
turn a bad learning experience into a positive one, it'll just make you a stronger, better clinician.
Yeah, 100%. I think that sometimes when students have a bump and in their experience in placements, and say if they don't pass or something like that, like it really discourages them. And then on
Yeah,
the next time that they do the placement, they're on like this this heightened level of stress, that
yeah,
of trauma. They're like, oh shit, like I don't want to fail again. Like that's literally on their mind, the forefront. So like they're
yeah,
always on high alert on anything that they do. So maybe that might be a detrimental to their learning, and might be like a miscommunication on other parts of the things that they could have missed in clinical things, and that might cause them to trip up again. So
yeah,
it's so hard for them to let go of that previous mistake or whatever happened, whether it's their fault or not, right? Like I think it's really important for us to try to move on, but like try to learn from those
yeah.
reflections.
But what you're describing there is exactly the same process a patient will go through if
Hmm.
they if they can't walk the distance that they wanted to walk. It's a failure, and we're very good as physios. We're very good at reassuring, remotivating, looking at alternative ways, and I think we have to apply those same skills to ourselves. Just because you failed on one occasion, it doesn't mean to say that you're going to fail again. You just need to find alternative routes and not let that initial failure influence or impact the progress that you still have potential to make. So it's about using reflection to identify we do have these skills. We do, because we employ them incredibly well with patients. We need to do it to ourselves as well. Okay, just failing a placement doesn't mean to say that you're not going to make it. It just means to say that we need to address the approach we've got into that situation, amend it a little bit, and try again.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you for that insight. I want to ask you a little bit about private versus public practice because I haven't really had that exposure until I moved to the UK. Can you kind of explain to me what your thoughts are on working in public versus private settings in general as a physio?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't worked in the NHS for a long time.
Oh,
Yeah, no, that's okay. Um, I mean, the NHS is a fantastic resource. Okay, I think that the clinicians that work within it are incredibly resourceful with their both their time and managing the patients. Often it's incredibly stressful.
hmm,
Often, as a result of sort of staff shortages or pressures. You know, through different means, et cetera, et cetera. I think physios within the NHS are absolutely essential. I do think that they maybe can't always meet the demand, and I think that's certainly the case within more outpatient kind of musculoskeletal settings. That for patients to have to wait for treatment to their back pain or whatever, I think it's just crazy. It's just crazy because patients, if a patient is in pain, every day that they're in pain is having a
yeah,
detrimental effect on their their mental health, their well-being, their social interactions.
absolutely.
Obviously sort of thinking about that kind of biopsychosocial kind of impact and model. So we're actually, unfortunately, and it's just the way that the resources are. There is only so much money, and it's already, I believe, quite overspent or generally,
Yeah,
anyway. So it is free at the point of contact. It is an incredibly valuable service that the UK should be proud of in some respects. However, we have to acknowledge, I do believe that the private sector is a growing one, and it can offer to fill gaps that the NHS is struggling to do. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think that I would have any problem in sort of paying a little bit extra to be able to access more efficient services privately. Um, I mean, even sort of going to A&E. I mean, it's free. It feels crazy that it's free. I'd sort of happily sort of make a contribution. Given that the
mm,
services that you get there. But it's not the way at the moment, and that's fine. I think choices of what we can do with patients are often quite different, public versus private. I think
yeah,
when you're working privately, you have a better choice of what interventions you can employ. And that's to do with the fact that the funding is potentially there. You've got the time within the sessions to be able to explore it. You've got as many sessions as the person or the insurers are willing to pay for. Whereas in obviously the NHS, you might be prescriptively given sort of 6 sessions and that's it. It's and often it's very much related to exercise therapy. I mean, there are,
hmm,
and I don't think this is the choice of the clinicians at all, but there are numerous people that I speak to that sort of say, I went to the NHS physio and I was just given exercises. They didn't do any sort of manual treatments. Now,
yeah,
manual treatments might not be appropriate, and that's fine. But it does seem to be an overwhelming trend that there just isn't the time to deliver that same sort of level of care that you potentially can do within private settings. But it swings and roundabouts. Not everyone can afford private, so the NHS in that respect is as I say, a sort of fantastic resource.
yeah. Because I was really excited to learn a lot more manual therapy and touching bodies and moving body parts here and there because, in personal training, that's what I used to do a lot with my clients. And
Yeah,
sure, I coached them on exercises and that's I think it was because of manual therapy in personal training that's where I got excited about physiotherapy. And then when I did the academics here in the UK, it was like, yeah, we learn a little bit about mobilization here and there, but like it was mostly like, oh, exercise, exercise, because evidence-based, because um,
yeah,
other factors such as like we want patients to be self-managing, and I guess that's where the difference between like the public side and the private side becomes, right? And I think it's really important for patients to take these conditions into their own hands, but at the same time, like we could also support them by giving them a little bit of a nudge by like, hey, like I can help you feel a little bit better for the next 3 days so then you can employ better exercises here and there with
yeah,
different types of therapy that the NHS might not be super reluctant to do.
yeah,
What does the evidence say? Sometimes I don't know. I'm very open-minded in terms of like what types of treatments out there is there
yeah.
for people to manage themselves, right? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And it's very much about we have to go back to that sort of patient-centered care. Everyone expects or has different expectations, and a lot of patients do expect physio in the same way that sort of osteopaths and chiropractors will be very hands-on. They kind of expect a similar from physio. What I tell the patients is often it isn't what the physio does in the session, it's what the patient does between the sessions that has the
Mm-hmm.
longest and best effect. So we know that exercise therapy is incredibly powerful, not only to address initial sort of aches and pains, but also to sort of prevent them from recurring, which from a self-management point of view is a
Mm-hmm.
far better outcome that
Mm-hmm.
for the patient. Like I said, I'm not working in the NHS. It's only sort of like anecdotal sort of information I have
Yep.
really these
Yep.
days. But it does seem that there's a lot of exercises given and not an awful lot of that kind of time allowed to go through them or supporting them with it, and that's following a quite a long wait to get there. It's free. I mean, with the best sort of intentions, what more do people expect or want? It's one of those things. If you kind of um, like sort of say if you can have a free session physiotherapy, you're kind of going to expect to have to wait a little bit, and it may
Mm-hmm.
not be to the standard of private. And that's just the historically the difference between public sector services and private anyway. They're run differently.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
is so fundamentally there's going to be a difference. But yeah, I mean, I would always sort of push a patient to recognize that self-management is the ultimate goal, okay? Because it's a much longer lasting, less sort of reliant pathway. We don't want I don't want people keep coming back and having to have physio. That means I'm
No,
not doing my
definitely not.
job.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's maybe not the best business model out there, but I'm in for what's best for the patients, not necessarily, that's my first and foremost sort of aim.
You might get more business when you don't see the patient more enough because, they will refer you to
Well,
their network and
exactly,
they will
exactly.
rave about you and they
Yeah.
friends of friends, family will come to you instead of, I don't know, the next door neighbor of physio. So maybe that is a decent business.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And in fact, even with the tutoring, I do sort of say, often people do kind of come to me and they sort of say, right, I want like 2 sessions a week for the next sort of year. And I'm like, whoa, okay, if you need that many sessions, I'm not doing a good job. Okay. I need to be building up your resilience, your confidence so that you can do this yourself. And I think that the same applies for physio. It's very much about encouraging that self-reliance, whether it's private, public, whatever. Ultimately we are try as physios, we're trying to promote people's independence, okay? And that ultimately is the bottom line.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks for that. I have this thought lately in terms of how the world is moving towards healthcare.
Hmm.
And I want to, get your 2 cents into this. And it's kind of related to being hands-on care and hands-off care, plus technology that is moving towards healthcare, right? So how tech innovation in physiotherapy or healthcare in general, especially in potentially like AI, is a either an opportunity or a concern for healthcare professionals like you and I, or doctors or nurses. Um, do you have any thoughts into where we're going from this day and age? Because it's really like I want to be very hopeful, and I want AI to be something that, hey, like we can rely to promote more services, reach to more people, to people that who are, live in rural areas that we can't necessarily treat all the time because there's no physios or XYZ in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's another aspect of technology that's always not necessarily good. So, yeah, what do you think?
It's well, I think it's already changed a little bit of our lives over the last sort of couple of years. You're talking there about sort of telehealth or tele-rehabilitation, that kind of remote management of patients. I think for some patients it's absolutely perfect and ideal. If patients have got long-standing conditions,
Hmm.
then checking in via either a telephone or a virtual call, it saves travel, it saves their money, because often consultation is just that. It's just a check-in to make sure that the patients have got the opportunity to ask questions or explore something that may be not quite right. So yeah, absolutely. I think with regards to accessing information, and sort of, there's always people are always sort of worried about AIs taking jobs and things like that. I think that we've got to integrate it into what we do sensibly, and that takes time and it takes research and it takes funds. But I do think it's potentially a really valuable tool. Humans make errors. I'm not suggesting that computers don't make errors at the moment. I'm sure they do. I mean, that's well known that it's still sort of, very early days for it. But with the right support, potentially it could be a really valuable asset. I've always used a little bit of technology in whatever I'm doing with regards to physio, partly
Hmm.
sort of to help motivate patients with their exercises, whether it was the Nintendo Wii or the Connect,
Yeah.
or whatever. I mean, unfortunately, those technologies they cost money,
Yeah.
and you'll find that private healthcare systems like the US, Canada, whatever, they are likely to employ them far sooner than maybe within the public sectors in the UK. And the private sectors that promote them or use them will, they're potentially few and far between to start with, but times change. If you think back to 20 years ago, hardly anyone had a mobile phone, and now, I don't know what the stats are, but most people do. So
Yeah.
times do change, and we have to change with them. And I think anyone arguing that technology shouldn't be part of physio, they're the ones that are potentially doing themselves out of a job,
Mm.
eventually. But it is what it is. I mean, there's an array of technology now, sort of like from taking consultation notes and writing soap notes from them. Audible. I can't remember the names of the companies, but they're easy enough to find. To sort of just organizing clinics. I mean, it can all be automated through the use of AI, and why not? Saves time.
Yeah. In terms of AI automation, because I can see AI being implemented into physio in a way in terms of like assessments and as well as potentially analyzing movements and like what the AI would give as suggestions or clinical reasoning why
Yeah.
patient is doing this XYZ, or what they may be presenting due to the subjective history taking and stuff like that. And it could go as far as, doing the objectives, be like, what is the muscle grade strength of that patient if there is a touch facility from the AI as well, like if it
Yeah.
does go that far. I
Or
guess, like, how are we trying to balance if we are actually there and,
okay.
using the AI for assessments, using the AI to do XYZ, like does that kind of hinder
Yeah.
our learning and our clinical muscle a little bit, or
Do you know, I think it's not so much about our learning or our clinical skills. I think we've got to go back to that sort of patient-centered approach to treatment, and what we know it needs to be part of the delivery of their support, their treatment, and it's recognised that there almost seems to be like a mental health crisis, and part of that is this kind of communication with others. People kind of just communicating by phone. COVID sort of was obviously a huge cause of a lot of mental health for lots of many different reasons, but humans aren't designed to be isolated. They're designed to interact with each other, and so we have to, I think, continue to accommodate that need. So I would say that, yeah, work alongside AI, but you still need that empathy. You still need that, the kindness, the sort of like the desire to help someone else. That comes across in any interaction that you have with a patient. And I
Yeah.
don't know that AI are going to be that advanced, certainly anytime soon, to be able to offer that, because it isn't the care that we offer a patient, the reassurance we offer a patient isn't what we say. It's not the answer that we give. It's not the clinical reasoning. It's the touch on the shoulder. It's the look. It's the kind words. It's the responsiveness to a certain situation that I think helps to motivate or inspire, or helps direct a patient. And that so yeah, so use AI to help with some clinical reasoning, but the implementation of it, the delivery of it, um, I think is got to be hands on.
Yeah.
It is about contact. It is about us being able to grade that contact and facilitate movement with our own sort of feelings and understanding of how the body works. To that respect, I can't see how AI will replace that. I think that interaction with other humans, other patient, that's going to be ultimately probably the more important component of what we're able to deliver. Yeah, and so, fine. Yeah, some of the clinical reasoning might be delivered by or supported by AI, but it'll always need to be checked by someone that's able to sort of process it and reason with consideration to that patient-centered approach. Is it right for this person? Because you could have two people with identical injuries or conditions, but their goals, their outlook, their expectations be completely different, and that takes a certain extended assessment and clinical reasoning to be able to process that.
I think I 100% agree to it. I think like even if AI can do the assessments, even if AI can do, recommendations on a lot of conditions and treatments and all that stuff, I think the human aspect of it, the human value of it is what makes us valuable, right? And
Yeah,
especially for those who are in this field, we really, really want to be part of the forefront of the service providers as the
yeah,
human to human interaction. And I think that's where we as healthcare professionals become that type of value, right? And
yeah.
that's a really good point that you've made. And before closing, I feel really, really lucky to have you as part of my learning journey, as my mentor.
Thank you.
And I'm sure so many others people would say the same. So thank
Mm,
you for being part of my growth.
that's quite all
Um,
right. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I have just a couple cute more questions. If you could offer one piece of advice to someone just starting out, what would it be?
We're starting out with physio.
Yeah.
Okay. It's never going to be easy, but it'll always be worth it. So,
Mm,
for example, I think one of my nice little quotes is, "You can't climb a mountain by looking at it."
mm. Just gotta take one step at a time.
Absolutely, it's going to be hard work, but the view from the top is going to be amazing. Okay, and it's worth every step. Okay.
Okay. And what is next on the horizon for you personally or professionally?
What, just today? No. Um, I'm gonna have a little sleep. No. What's next on the horizon? I just hope to be able to continue to support students. And for me, it's not about having any big goals or ambitions. It's about being happy. It's about being content and just enjoying life. Really, for me, it's the simple things that
Oh,
that really matter in life. Not having I don't want to be stressed by having huge goals that I'm going to have to bust my gut to achieve. And maybe that sounds a little bit lacking in drive, but I take pleasure in simple things like I've got an allotment. I enjoy the fresh air. I enjoy going out for walks. I enjoy spending time with my family. I don't need an awful lot more at the moment. Supporting students, doing my job, helping patients. It's all good. Meeting people, good people like yourself, and
Oh, thank you.
motivating them to experience the same benefits of the career that I have. So
I think it takes like a long journey and whatever type of transition has to get to that level for you to say you want to be content and just enjoy the time that you
yeah,
have because you
yeah,
probably worked really hard to get to where you are, right? So I
yeah.
would like to get into that place one day.
You will.
And
You absolutely will. And it
um,
does. It takes time. It takes
yeah,
time, and I am content. I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I enjoy the balance. It is achievable, and it's there for anyone that wants it. So you just got to work a little, like you say, a little bit hard, and but enjoy it. Enjoy
yeah,
the journey.
thank you.
It shouldn't be arduous. You got to,
Yeah.
take the opportunities when they come, and learn from what you can.
Absolutely. Do you want to plug in on where listeners could potentially find you for further support if they ever need? Or
Yeah,
your
I don't mind. I've got a website, rebeccathetutor.co.uk, and so you can find me on that. Ping me an email or whatever, go from there. But yeah, easy come, easy go. I'm happy to support people in whatever issues they're having with their studies, and I'll always offer to meet people, certainly. So, first free session, and you can see if we get on, whether I can support you, go from there.
Well, you heard it here. I'll put it on the show notes. And thank you for being part of this and sharing your wisdom, Rebecca. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
your support for this passion project of mine. Let's just call it a day.
Thank you very much.
That's it for now. If you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with someone who needs to hear it and consider leaving Slice of Anecdote a 5-star review. Your support is truly loved by me and means the world. Catch you on the next episode. Bye bye.